about a quick turnaround? Today, only days after a strong re-election win, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is, in fact, still committed to a two-state solution with Palestine if circumstances improve. Netanyahu had promised the day before re-election, when he was slipping in the polls, that if re-elected, there would be no two-state solution with Palestine. In light of that statement, the United States then announced that it would consider supporting a UN Security Council resolution that would call for the resumption of political talks to conclude a final peace settlement. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki just yesterday did not rule out the possibility of the U.S. supporting a UN resolution on Israel-Palestine. But today, she backtracked, trying to avoid saying whether the U.S. would actually vote against Israel on a resolution.
Is it possible
that is biased or unfair? No, but
okay,
obviously there are a range of options in the UN Security Council. I'm not going to prejudge it further.
But you're not going to vote in favor of or sit by and abstain from something that you think is unfair or biased against your big ally and top ally in the Middle East.
I think what we're going to look at is what the content of a resolution would be. I'm not going to prejudge what that will be, and we haven't made a decision.
In other words, your previous definition of biased or unfair might change.
I don't have anything more to add to preview on this topic.
I want to be very clear that we share Israel's concern about the security environment in the region, which is why, as part of the last round of talks, the President and Secretary Kerry directed General John Allen to prepare a detailed plan to provide for security in the West Bank over the long term. In the end, we know what a peace agreement should look like. The borders of Israel and an independent Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps. Each state needs secure and recognized borders, and there must be robust provisions that safeguard Israel's security. An occupation that has lasted for almost 50 years must end, and the Palestinian people must have the right to live in and govern themselves in their own sovereign state. President Obama still firmly believes what he said in Jerusalem 2 years ago, that peace is necessary, just, and possible. Peace is necessary because it's the only way to ensure that a secure state of Israel is both Jewish and democratic. Israel cannot maintain military control of another people indefinitely. That's the truth.
While we may at times disagree, as friends sometimes will, the bonds between the United States and Israel are unbreakable. And the commitment of the United States to the security of Israel is ironclad.
President Obama facing harsh criticism over his Mideast proposal announced just last week at the State Department. The president this weekend reiterating his call for negotiations that would create a Palestinian state based on 1967 borders. That would be borders that existed before the Six-Day War, along with land swaps between the Palestinians and Israel. The president and his comments at a rally, at a speech in Washington, not sitting so well with our ally. And now there are new questions about the future of Mideast peace and talks on that. John Bolton is a former U.S. ambassador to the UN. He's a Fox News contributor. It's nice to have you here in our studios.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. So the president speaking to AIPAC, which is the largest pro-Israel lobbying group in the United States, and he said that this is long-standing U.S. policy, that he was simply coming out and clarifying it, but that this is really the way that the U.S. this is what the line that we have towed for many, many years. Is he right?
He's flatly wrong on that. If you go back to the foundational UN Security Council Resolution 242 after the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, that resolution calls for all states in the region to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries free from threats or acts of force. Doesn't say anything about the 67 line or anything else. And I think it's a key point here. That 67 line was a 1949 armistice line. It simply reflects where the Israeli and Arab armies ended up the conflict. There's another armistice line, too, the 1973 armistice line, which is Israel's greatest extent of control. If you're going to start with any line, why not start with that line?
You know, a lot of people within the administration who are trying to come out and explain the president's position say that, look, this was essentially the deal that was on the table in the late 90s in the Clinton administration when the Israeli prime minister at the time, Ehud Barak, sat down. He offered the same exact kind of arrangement, and of course it didn't come about. Well, but what's the difference?
Right, there was a small problem. The Palestinians rejected it. You know, I think, though, that just talking about whether it's the 67 boundary or whatever, and talking about land swaps, which is kind of a trivial little word, really understates the real issue here. It's not where you draw the line on a map. It's whether Israel has confidence that the people who live on the other side of that line are going to acknowledge Israel's right to exist and its ability to live in peace and security. And that is very much open to question
And
today.
here you have Hamas, which is a known terror organization. Right. Benjamin Netanyahu likens them to the Palestinians' version of al-Qaeda. And this is a group that has a major say. They're in partnership within the Palestinian sort of government apparatus. So how can we do any kind of business? How can the Israelis be expected to sit down for talks with a group that has come out and said, we want you off the face of the earth?
Well, I think you've put your finger on it, and it's really why I think any idea of advancing the Israeli-Palestinian peace process now is completely futile. The lead group in the Palestinian government, Fatah, which renounced terrorism before, although many people doubt that, has concluded a deal with the terrorist group Hamas that essentially puts them in coalition. So I don't think there's really anybody responsible on the Palestinian side for Israel to talk to. It mystifies me why the president raised this whole subject.
Do you sincerely believe, Ambassador Bolton, that the Palestinians want peace, that the Arab world wants a peace deal between the Palestinian people and the State of Israel?
Well, I think that Palestinian people have been used by radicals and extremists in the Arab world for a long time to be the tip of the spear against Israel. And I think now is not the time, with so much in turmoil in the Middle East, to think that we can go ahead and create a Palestinian state. Look at what's happened in Egypt, where leading politicians are calling for major modifications of those Camp David Accords, which has been a foundation of our effort for peace and stability in the region for 30-plus years. So I think it's a very inopportune moment for the president to raise it, unless he intended to try and squeeze Israel, which many people believe.
John Bolton is the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
Iran's giving weapons to terrorist groups surrounding Israel.
We share your hope and your vision for the spread of democracy in the Middle East. I appreciate the fact that you reaffirmed once again now and in our conversation and in actual deed the commitment to Israel's security. We value your efforts to advance the peace process. This is something that we want to have accomplished. Israel wants peace. I want peace. What we all want is a peace that will be genuine, that will hold, that will endure. And I think that we both agree that a peace based on illusions will crash eventually on the rocks of Middle Eastern reality. And that the only peace that will endure is one that is based on reality, on unshakable facts. I think for there to be peace, the Palestinians will have to accept some basic realities. The first is that while Israel is prepared to make generous compromises for peace, it cannot go back to the 1967 lines, because these lines are indefensible, because they don't take into account certain changes that have taken place on the ground, demographic changes that have taken place over the last 44 years. Remember that before 1967, Israel was all of 9 miles wide. It was half the width of the Washington Beltway. And these were not the boundaries of peace. They were the boundaries of repeated wars, because the attack on Israel was so attractive from them. So we can't go back to those indefensible lines, and we're going to have a long-term military presence along the Jordan. I discussed this with the president. I think that we understand that Israel has certain security requirements that will have to come into place in any deal that we make. The second is echoes something the president just said, and that is that Israel cannot negotiate with a Palestinian government that is backed by Hamas. Hamas, as the president said, is a terrorist organization committed to Israel's destruction. It's fired thousands of rockets on our cities, on our children. It's recently fired an anti-tank rocket at a yellow school bus, killing a 16-year-old boy. And Hamas has just attacked you, Mr. President, and the United States for ridding the world of bin Laden. So Israel obviously cannot be asked to negotiate with a government that is backed by the Palestinian version of Al-Qaeda. I think President Abbas has a simple choice. He has to decide if he negotiates or keeps his pact with Hamas or makes peace with Israel. And I can only express what I said to you just now, that I hope he makes the choice, the right choice, of choosing peace with Israel.
Israel needs strong borders that will keep its people safe from these attacks. President Obama recently told Israel,
We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines.
but the 1967 borders would force Israel to be only 9 miles wide in some areas.
Everyone knows that the 1967 lines are simply indefensible for Israel.
Putting only 9 miles between innocent Israelis and terrorists, just standing on the other side of the border, launching rockets and missiles at them.
In the pre-1967 borders, Israel was barely 10 miles wide at its narrowest point. The bulk of Israel's population lived within artillery range of hostile Arab armies. I am not about to ask Israel to live that way again.
President Obama, why are you demanding the Israeli people live that way? Live in danger. No other president in history has done this. President Obama, why are you doing this to our most faithful ally?
In an unstable Middle East, Israel is the one anchor of stability. In a region of shifting alliances, Israel is America's unwavering ally. You've condemned the Iranian regime for its genocidal aims. History will salute you, America. Israel has no better friend than America, and America has no better friend than Israel. We stand together to defend democracy, to advance peace, to fight terrorism. I speak on behalf of the Jewish people and the Jewish state when I say to you, representatives of America, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your unwavering support for Israel. Thank you for ensuring that the flame of freedom burns bright throughout the world. May God bless all of you, and may God forever bless the United States of America.